Hey everybody, KMO here with another Out of My Head video, and I think this will be my last video for a while on the book The Absent Superpower, full title on screen, don't have it committed to memory, by Peter Zeihan. And the last time I talked about this book, I said it was really fun reading, it's very engaging, it really appealed to my interests, but to me, the phrase toxic masculinity is tied to the sound of a needlessly loud vehicle of some kind. Anyway, Peter Zeihan's book, The Absent Superpower. I said it was fun, it was engaging, gave me a lot of food for thought, but it's not that I wasn't convinced, I just didn't fully understand what his argument was for saying that the US was going to be pulling back from its, decades-long global commitment to maintain high seas security, stability of international trade, and just be, more of an inward facing, a superpower that doesn't really have any global interests. As Peter Zeihan likes to say, a country with global reach due to its massive military, but no global interests, because it's not really dependent on international trade. It's largely, trade-wise, a very self-sufficient country. Why would we pull back? Well, that's the wrong question, as it turns out. Because it's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's something that has been happening for a while and continues to happen. Here, take a look at this graph. Peter Zeihan, this is not from his book. This is just something I found online from the Pew Research Center. But look, this is a graph of military overseas deployments by U.S. troops over time. I was born in 1968. So look at the graph here. That's the Vietnam War. So clearly, a lot of troops overseas at that time. The U.S. still had a draft. So a lot of U.S. soldiers overseas who didn't want to be there. But I graduated high school in 1986. Well, look at 86. It's about half the level of the height of the Vietnam War. And then we come up to the 1990s. Well, the Berlin Wall came down in 1991? So really that big slope starting from 1990 down to, I guess, the mid to late 90s. Big decrease in overseas deployment of U.S. troops, well, that coincides with the end of the Cold War. And then, it goes up a little bit because of 9/11 and the war on terror. But notice that it doesn't even go up to where it was in the mid-1980s. The end of the Cold War meant a tapering off of the U.S. commitment to maintain military strength around the globe, to contain the Soviets, because the Soviets were no more. Thinking about this in terms of a future event is the wrong frame. It is ongoing. The U.S. is withdrawing its military commitments overseas. Secondly, and I've already mentioned this is, from the book, the U.S. never really profited from the Bretton Woods Agreement and the, global stability and opportunity for a variety of countries to participate in free trade. That list of countries, at first was just the Allies, the U.S. allies in World War II. But then we opened it up to the defeated Axis powers, and then over time let more and more people participate to the point where now Russia, which requires the ability to export its mineral resources and its energy resources in a free trade environment to survive economically, and China, which is absolutely dependent on exports to countries like the United States, they are utterly dependent on this, the maintenance of this global trade security, which is made possible by the ongoing military commitment of the United States. And the United States never really participated so much in that arrangement, as a beneficiary of free trade, because one, we have a whole continent. We have all the resources we need right here. And two, if it's really just a sweetheart deal for the U.S. to profit economically, well, then it's not so much a bribe. And it was meant to be a bribe to the rest of the world to say, hey, look, we will give you the opportunity to trade in a way that you couldn't before because there wasn't, global stability, there wasn't safety on the high seas. We will make sure it is safe for you to import raw materials from wherever you need to, do whatever value-added activity you're going to do, and then sell those products to whoever you can, wherever you need to. If the United States set all that up just so that it would be a sweetheart deal for us, well, then it doesn't work as a bribe. What were we bribing these other countries to do? Basically, to let us take care of their security arrangements so that we could coordinate the global containment of the Soviet Union. But here's the thing. Soviet Union went away in the early 1990s. So the echo or the sort of remnant of this global security arrangement meant to contain the Soviet Union, which was of such great benefit to countries like Germany and China, it hasn't been in U.S. interest for a while. It's just, it's taken the U.S. a while to get over the inertia and the habits of the Cold War. But, the Cold War ended a generation ago. We are over it. And finally, and this last bit doesn't come from Peter Zeihan, it comes from a different geopolitical forecaster and strategist named George Friedman. And if you start watching, Peter Zeihan videos on YouTube, it won't take the YouTube algorithm very long to figure out, hey, you also want to watch some George Friedman. So George Friedman talks about the disintegration of the NATO alliance, and he's not so much focused on energy the way Peter Zeihan is, but he's more focused on just international relations and treaties and mutual dependences and whatnot. And NATO has always been a bit of a sham, in that it's described as a military alliance. But if you don't have a military, you can't be a partner in a military alliance, because a military alliance says that we will treat attacks on each other's countries as if they were an attack on our country. So if a NATO ally gets attacked, the U.S. is required to respond as if it was Florida or Connecticut that got attacked. Well, Germany doesn't have an army to speak of. They don't want to spend the money, and why should they? Because, for decades, the U.S. has been taking care of their security arrangements for them. Well, several presidents, not just Trump, presidents before Trump have said gently, politely to the Europeans, look, y'all, you need to spend a little bit more of your own money on your defense, because we've been doing it for you for free for a long time now. If Germany doesn't have an army, they have no basis for being a participant in a military alliance with anybody, because they cannot promise to come to anybody's aid without their own military. So the U.S., has been polite about this for a while, but over time we've been getting less and less polite, and the whole time bringing the troops home. And another reason to, take Peter Zeihan and George Friedman's pronouncement seriously on this is really the U.S. voters have been voting for presidents who have promised to be focused inward, to be focused on the U.S. economy. It's the economy, stupid. That was, a Bill Clinton campaign slogan. And Bill Clinton was elected in the same election in which we got rid of George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush was a foreign policy president extraordinaire. He had been the ambassador to China. He had been the director of the CIA. This was a guy with serious international relations chops, and he was a one-term president, and we chucked him out for a guy who said, hey, it's the economy, stupid. Because the United States was feeling the pain of globalized trade. We used to make steel in this country. Now our steel is made in China. Something that comes from, I think, George Friedman more than Peter Zeihan is that, China is heading for a big fall. I mean, in the coming chaos, which will result from the withdrawal of the military security guarantee of the United States, China is very likely to break up into different regional powers. And they, if they don't enjoy the, access to safe overwater transport internationally, they can't really be the steel suppliers to the world. They won't be the steel suppliers to the United States. It will be in the interest of the United States, strategically, to create our own steel, but also just in terms of jobs, in terms of, the strength of the domestic economy, and more importantly, from my perspective, the ability to share the wealth broadly throughout the population here in the United States. It'll make a lot of sense to reopen Pittsburgh, basically, to start making steel again. I'm in the second listen through on Peter Zeihan's book, and much of what I've just related to you doesn't actually come from the book. I didn't read the earlier book, The Accidental Superpower, so maybe a lot of it's covered there, but most of the new information that I've got, which makes the arguments he makes in the book more compelling, have come from me just listening to his talks. He gives a lot of talks. He's astounding. I've seen 2 recordings of him in different venues, different conferences, giving the exact same talk, word for word. He has this hour-long presentation memorized down to the syllable, down to the gesture. He's either seriously coached and rehearsed, or he just knows this material backwards and forwards, probably both. All right, so that's what I got from Peter Zeihan, and, thanks to the YouTube algorithm, George Friedman as well. I'll put some links to talks that I watched below. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you again tomorrow.